In one of my recent videos, we chatted about processed food and the effects that it's had on our health since cutting it out. So, today I wanted to talk about how we prep for the weekends to set ourselves up for success so that we do not be tempted to eat out and just grab the quick food or processed food from the store. And that is by prepping a little bit on Fridays and getting things set up so that we can have a successful weekend. This usually looks pretty different, and I've just recently started doing this again. So, what this looks like is typically it is just me and Ben. So, I will usually prep a little bit of food, just planning on somebody stopping by or friends or family or somebody stopping by. So, I do prep enough so that I can just make one big meal if needed, or I can split it up into multiple small meals if needed. So, on this particular weekend, I was prepping a whole chicken. The easiest way to do this for me is just to put it in the oven and roast it. But first, I like to cover it in sauce. So it's not even really sauce. All it is just melted butter with all of your spices. You can totally customize this to whatever spices you want. This recipe is over on my blog, so I will have that link down below for you guys. So if you want to follow this recipe to exact, then you can. But roasted chicken is one of those things. It's so easy. You can put whatever spices you want on it, and more than likely it is going to turn out good. But prepping a whole chicken is the plan for this weekend, and that way we can turn it into several different meals. So on this first night, I actually had leftover mashed potatoes and green beans in the refrigerator already. So, what we'll typically do is eat the leftover mashed potatoes and green beans with the chicken breasts that are on the roasted chicken. So, we'll just pull those off and we will serve that just as one meal. We'll usually do vegetables with it and then just the roasted chicken. And whatever is left over the next day, and we can always break it up because typically on the weekends, I do like to lay out 1 pound of pork chops and then 1 pound of ground sausage. So that is already in the fridge and it is thawing, but those are just very, very quick to fry up. It takes 10 minutes to fry pork chops and then probably the same to fry up some sausage. So those are very quick as long as you've got them laid out. The sausage and pork chops are just to break up the chicken. That way, we're just not getting tired of eating the chicken. So, we will probably throw in the pork chops and the sausage in there somewhere in the lineup. But like I said, the first night will be the chicken breast with vegetables. And then our other plan with the chicken is to turn it into chicken pot pie. So, later on in this video, you will see me prep pie crust. And I actually just go ahead and pop that into the fridge. That way, it's already made, and I don't have to spend the time making the pie crust, rolling it out, or anything like that. Because part of eating the no process, no preservatives food is you need to prep ahead a little bit your breads and your pie crust, things like that, because they do take a little bit of time to make, probably 15 minutes to mix up and then roll out to get everything ready. And that's 15 minutes that does set you back. So it's easier for me to just plan ahead a little bit and go ahead and get that rolled out and in the refrigerator. I'm just keeping the onion scraps. I usually keep them in a Ziploc bag in the freezer, and this one is labeled beef, so it's all of our beef bones, and then I also keep one for chicken. But I'll throw vegetable scraps in each. That way, it can make a really nice, flavorful beef like bone broth. We go through a ton of it in the wintertime, especially whenever we're eating a lot of soups and stews. So that is very handy to keep on hand. And whenever the bag gets full, then I'll just dump it in a pot and make a big batch of it and can it up. In my last video where I shared about cutting out processed food and trying to cook from scratch more, many of you guys said that you wanted to do it, but you just didn't know if you would have the time. You were asking me to make the time and stuff like that. And it is truly just one of those things that you have to prioritize and you really have to want it because it does take a little bit of extra time. I'm not going to lie to you because it is so easy to just pop something in the microwave and go on. And we are trying not to use the microwave anymore. So that adds a little bit of time and getting used to it at first, it does add more time to your schedule. But once you get into the routine of things, it makes it more streamlined and less time focused, if that makes sense. So it becomes second nature and it doesn't take as long to get things accomplished and things done. On the Fridays where I like to prep, I'd really sit down and try and think about what I want to make that day. So I don't just go in the kitchen and start making a bunch of random stuff because it kind of has to have a little bit of a plan. I mean, you totally can. I know some people are not planners. I am in order for it to make sense to me. So I chose a roasted chicken today, a donut bread so that we could have for breakfast, and then I needed to prep the pie crust. So, in order for me to do that, I knew that the chicken needed to go in first because that was going to take the longest to bake. And then after that, I needed to make the donut bread because that needed to go in the oven so that it could bake also. So automatically, those things just need mixed up so they get thrown in the oven, and so I'm not waiting around on them forever. But the main key is while you're waiting on those things to bake, don't just go sit down or do something else. Don't go watch TV. You need to move on to the next thing so that it's staying in rhythm. And so while those are baking, I will work on mixing up the pie crust, and then I will clean up the kitchen, get the dishes done. That way it is all streamlined and everything is just getting done. It's like you're knocking out each of the things instead of just taking an all day effort to do this. You're just getting it done. I think this took an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to do all this. And it may seem like a lot, but also it took a lot of the wait time off because while I'm doing this, I was able to knock out breakfast for us for the entire weekend because we will have this donut bread and then we will probably serve it with either eggs on some mornings and then we may do the sausage one morning. So it's very streamlined and that takes care of breakfast. And then the chicken, and that is going to be 2 meals for us, probably more because the chicken pot pie, we can eat on that for a couple meals. And then the roasted chicken, we can have that for a couple meals. So honestly, this is more like 4 meals for us. But also, if you have a bigger family than us, then you may need to prep double of what everything is. Each Friday is usually very different based on what our plans are for that weekend. Typically, I know a little bit about what we're going to do on the weekend, but then, of course, things come up spur of the moment. And usually, if that happens, then we'll just move that meal to the next night or so on, depending on if we eat at our friend's house or if we go out to eat. Because, like I said, it's an 80-20 rule. We still want to go out with our friends and have a good time. So we still will go out to eat. And if that happens, then we just move whatever food I've prepped to the next meal. And nothing goes to waste. One of the biggest things that has changed for me is since we're not using the microwave anymore, whatever leftovers are left, I will leave them in the container that they were originally cooked in, and I will just put those directly into the fridge. It does take up a little bit more space in there, but we make it work because that way you're not doing dishes twice. So we're not using the microwave anymore. And typically, whatever they were cooked in originally, that is what they need to go back in to be reheated, whether it be on the stove or in the oven. And it's the easiest way I've found. You're cutting out a set of dishes there instead of having to dirty up storage containers and everything else. So it does take a little less time because you're not trying to find the containers and put the containers into the fridge. So we just put the pots and pans directly into the fridge. I know some people may not like that, but that is how I do it. It has saved us a lot of time and a lot of time on dishes because we do not have a dishwasher. So it does save me quite a bit of time whenever it comes to dishes. So that is a tip that you can either take or leave. The last thing I'm prepping is the pie crust, and I am using fresh milled flour. So on both of these recipes, the donut bread and the pie crust, they both used soft white wheat. And usually I'll use my hard white wheat for bread and things that need a good gluten structure. Everything else is more like pastries. So that I'll always use soft or either einkorn, either one is fine. So part of being on this journey is trying to source the best ingredients that you can, but also trying to find the middle ground there. So pie crust is something that's pretty easily to make, and it's even easier if you use the food processor. I enjoy using the food processor. It is just way less like mixing and stuff, and I don't know, it just seems to come together better for me in a food processor. So I do usually use that, and don't get me wrong, everybody loves just running out and getting a pie crust from the freezer section at the store. So whenever I go to actually make the chicken pot pie, it will seem like that because I will be pulling it out of the refrigerator because it's already prepped and ready to go. And pie crust is one of those things that you can make up to like 10 and put in your freezer at a time if you want, because they keep so well in the freezer. And you can go ahead and even put them in a pie, like your baking dish, your pie pan, and freeze them so that they're already in the shape. So that's what I did on one of these. And if you want, just flash freeze them and then pull them out. And you'll just have to stack them inside of each other to make sure that they don't break or bust. Make sure nothing heavy gets sat on them, because they will break in the freezer, just like a store-bought one. So that is what I did today. I went ahead and rolled out my pie crust and put one inside of my pie pan already and put that one in the fridge. And I went ahead and shaped it and crimped the corners. The other one I just rolled out and left in between my two sheets of parchment paper and left flat. So that one is going to be my top. It's going to be the lid of my pie. So that one didn't need to be crimped or anything. It just needed to stay flat. But I did go ahead and roll it out because it's easier if you go ahead and shape your pie crust while it's at room temperature, because that butter cools down and then you can put it back in the fridge and then you'll still get your flaky pie crust that you want, but it's just easier to work. So typically as soon as I mix up the pie crust, I will go ahead and shape it for whatever I need it to be. That way you're not trying to wait on it to come to room temperature again, so that you can shape it after it's been froze or refrigerated already. This pie crust recipe is already on my blog, so I will have that link down below for you guys as well. I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind if you are on the same journey as me, because after reading the comments, I know that so many of you guys are in the same boat as me. You realize it's the food that is causing so much sickness in America. Like, it is everywhere you look, no matter where you look. It seems like everybody knows somebody that is sick, and they almost have, whether it be a autoimmune disease or something, but you know that it's food based, but maybe they just don't want to listen. But it's so important to just take what you can and do what you can. So that is something that I felt the need to take control of, is the food that we eat. I feel so much better whenever I'm not eating the junk at the store. So I've tried to honestly find pride in cooking, and I enjoy it so much. Like, turn on some music, a podcast, whatever you like to listen to, and just try to enjoy the process, because it does add more time in the kitchen. I'm not going to lie about that. It really does. So you have to find a way to enjoy it and not dread it. And one of the biggest things that I find is, it just makes me so happy to know that this is such a good meal, because every time I cook, it always tastes so much better. And it's like, why do I not do this every time? So finally, I was like, you can do this every time. Just start cooking from scratch. And I was raised on the Betty Crocker boxes of cake mix and everything. All of that was from scratch. Like, if something was pulled from a box and you added some eggs and the hamburger helper meals, everything like that, that was from scratch for me. It wasn't until I was 18, whenever I got married and moved out on my own. I was probably in my early 20s before I ever really truly figured out what from scratch food was. And it was taking the flour, taking the cocoa powder, taking the baking powder and all of that, and putting that together to make your brownies. It wasn't buying a box of the brownie mix already made at the store. That is not from scratch. So if you're new to cooking from scratch and just trying to figure out what it is and where to start, honestly, just try and take your favorite thing that you love to make. So if it's brownies or cookies or whatever, and just find an easy recipe, which I have several on my blog. So I feel like I've mentioned that a million times. I do have a food blog. It is down below. I will link it for you guys. But find a recipe on there and then just try to base it with the best ingredients you can. So with chocolate chips, try and get ones without natural flavors, or just try and get, I usually use Ghirardelli. It's the best one that our store has to offer. So I use that one. And then maybe just swap out, instead of using margarine, use some real butter. And instead of using vegetable oil, swap that out for lard or coconut oil, something like that. It's all about making healthy swaps where you can and when you can. It doesn't have to be the end all be all, and you don't have to be perfect. So just try and take it one step at a time. Hopefully you were able to take away at least one helpful tip to help you get through meal prepping for the weekends while trying to cut out processed foods and preservatives. But that is going to be it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys will like and subscribe.